My fiancé said, "Your sister's having my baby. Marry me and hide it, or I'll marry her." He thought I'd choose to avoid the scandal. He was wrong. I pretended to agree and threw a huge engagement party, inviting our entire families. Then, during my toast, I played the secret voicemail of him bragging about trapping me before exposing the truth to everyone. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My name is Judith. 3 years. For 3 years, I thought I had everything a woman could ever want. I had Gregory. And when you have a man like Gregory, or at least, the man I thought he was, you feel like the luckiest person on earth. We met in the most ordinary way, at a friend's backyard barbecue. He was funny, he was charming, and he had this laugh. It wasn't loud, but it was deep and warm, and it made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We talked for hours that day, next to a smoky grill, surrounded by the smell of burgers and freshly cut grass. It felt easy. Like coming home. Our life together wasn't a whirlwind romance from a movie, it was built on a foundation of 1,000 tiny, perfect, ordinary moments that made me feel safe. I remember the day we bought our house. It was a little 2-bedroom place with blue shutters and a porch swing that needed a new coat of paint. It was a fixer-upper, and we were so proud of it. The first weekend, before we even moved any furniture in, we decided to tackle the living room paint. We sat on the dusty hardwood floor, the echo of our voices bouncing off the bare walls, surrounded by what felt like 50 shades of beige and gray. I wanted a cool, sophisticated gray. He wanted a warm, cozy beige. We argued playfully for hours, holding up swatches, squinting at them in the changing light from the big bay window. Finally, laughing, he held up 2 swatches, one of my gray, one of his beige, and pushed them together. "How about greige?" he'd asked. Our first official compromise. It was perfect. He wasn't a grand gestures kind of guy. His love wasn't in bouquets of roses or expensive jewelry. It was in the quiet, steady rhythm of our daily life. It was in the cup of coffee he'd leave on my nightstand every single morning, knowing I hated getting out of bed without it. It was in the way he'd always text me a silly meme in the middle of a stressful workday because he knew I needed a laugh. On our 3-year anniversary, he didn't book a fancy dinner. Instead, he framed a map of the city and put a tiny red pin on the exact spot in the park where we'd had that first barbecue. The note attached simply said, "The most important place in the world." This is where it all started. We were deep in wedding planning. A small, intimate affair in the fall, when the leaves started to turn gold and red. We'd found the perfect venue, a rustic old barn that had been converted into a beautiful event space, with massive wooden beams and a stone fireplace. I had a picture of my wedding dress saved as the lock screen on my phone. It was simple, elegant, with long lace sleeves. I'd look at it sometimes when I was having a bad day, tracing the delicate pattern with my finger, and it would always make me smile. The future felt so bright, so certain. I remember calling my mom one afternoon, just gushing about everything. I was sitting on our new porch swing, the one Gregory had just finished painting, and I was describing the final details of the catering menu. I could hear the pure, unadulterated joy in her voice. "Oh, honey, I'm just so happy for you," she said. "I haven't heard this lightness in your voice in a long, long time. Gregory is such a good man, Judith. The way he looks at you, he adores you. He really is one of the good ones." And I believed it. With every fiber of my being, I believed it. He was my partner, my best friend, my future. We were building a real, solid life, brick by brick. We were happy. Genuinely, deeply, ordinarily happy. Or so I thought. It's funny, isn't it? How you can be standing in the middle of a beautiful, perfect picture, feeling safe and loved, and have absolutely no idea that someone you trust is standing right behind you with a can of gasoline and a match. It started on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were our sacred, boring night. We'd order takeout, open a cheap bottle of wine, and sit on the couch and just be. We'd talk about work, about our friends, about what to do with the garden. It was our little ritual, an anchor in the middle of a busy week. But this Tuesday was different. I got home from work a little after 6, my arms full of mail and groceries. The house was strangely quiet. Usually, I could hear the TV droning on with the evening news or the sound of him tinkering in the garage. But that night, there was just an unnerving silence, the kind that makes the hair on your arms stand up. I put the groceries on the counter and walked through the house. The mail lay unopened on the hall table. A glass, half full of what looked like whiskey, sat sweating on an end table, leaving a damp ring on the wood. I found him in the den, sitting in his favorite worn leather chair, staring out the window at the dying light. The lamps were off, and the room was filled with that gray, heavy gloom of approaching twilight. "Hey," I said, forcing a cheerful tone into my voice. "I was thinking Thai food tonight? Or maybe that new pizza place we wanted to try?" He didn't turn around. His shoulders were slumped. He just said, "I'm not really hungry." My heart did a little nervous flip-flop. That was the first, blaring alarm bell. Gregory was always hungry. Food was his love language. I walked over and gently placed my hand on his shoulder. It was tense, hard as a block of wood under my palm. "Is everything okay? You seem off. Did something happen at work?" I started running through a list of possibilities. Did his boss say something? Was he worried about the wedding expenses? We'd just put down a hefty deposit on the venue. He finally turned to look at me, and my breath caught in my throat. His face was pale, his eyes were bloodshot and puffy, and he looked haunted. He looked like a man who was carrying a terrible weight. "We need to talk, Judith," he said, and his voice was low and gravelly, a sound I'd never heard from him before. Those are the 4 words that can make any woman's world tilt on its axis. We need to talk. Nothing good ever follows those words. I sank down onto the ottoman across from him, my purse slipping from my shoulder onto the floor. The silence in the room stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I could hear the loud, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a tiny hammer blow against the stillness. My mind was racing, grasping at straws. Was it money? Was someone in his family sick? I braced myself for bad news, but I was bracing for the wrong kind. "Greg, you're scaring me," I finally whispered, my throat tight. "Whatever it is, just tell me. We can handle it together." He ran a hand over his face, a gesture I'd seen him do 1,000 times when he was stressed about a deadline or a bill. But this was different. This was despair. "I love you," he started, the words sounding rehearsed. "You know that, right? More than anything in this world." "I love you too," I said automatically, but the words felt hollow. Fear was starting to creep in, cold and sharp. "I made a mistake," he said, his eyes finally meeting mine. They were filled with a desperate, pleading look I didn't recognize. "A terrible, terrible mistake. And it's going to change everything." He told me it happened a few months ago. We'd had that stupid fight. I could barely even remember what it was about now. Something about him spending too much time with his friends, me feeling neglected. I'd been overwhelmed at work, he'd been distant, and it just exploded in a shower of stupid, hurtful words. I had packed an overnight bag and stayed at my cousin Diane's place for the weekend to cool off. Just a weekend. We'd talked on the phone Sunday night, apologized, and by Monday everything was back to normal. Or so I had thought. "I was lost without you, Judith," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I was hurt, I was lonely, I was drinking too much, and I did something stupid. Something I can never, ever take back." Every terrible possibility flashed through my mind, each one worse than the last. Had he gotten a DUI? Gambled away our savings for the wedding? But what he said next was worse than anything I could have ever imagined. It was the kind of thing you read about on some awful internet forum, the kind of thing that happens to other people, not to you. Never, ever to you. He took a long, shuddering breath, like a man about to jump from a great height. The air in the room felt thick and heavy, like trying to breathe through water. I sat perfectly still, my hands clenched into fists in my lap, waiting for the blow to land. "While you were gone that weekend," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, each word a carefully placed stone on my chest. I wasn't alone. I just stared at him, my mind refusing to process the sentence. It was like he was speaking a foreign language. I understood the words, but the meaning was impossible. "I messed up, Judith. I messed up so badly." "Who is it, Greg?" I asked, and my own voice sounded strange to me, distant and cold, like it was coming from someone else. My only thought was that it was probably someone from his office, maybe that receptionist who always flirted with him. It was a sickening thought, but it was a comprehensible one. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared down at his hands, which were twisting a loose thread on the arm of the chair. He was turning his wedding band, the simple gold one we'd picked out together just a month before, around and around on his finger. "It doesn't matter," he mumbled. It was a one-time thing. A stupid, drunken mistake. It meant nothing. "It matters to me," I said, and I could feel a hot flash of anger starting to crawl up my neck, burning away the cold fear. "Tell me who it was. Now." He finally looked up, and his eyes were glistening with unshed tears. For a brief, insane moment, I almost felt a flicker of pity for him. He looked so broken. Almost. And then he said her name. It was Cheryl. For a second, the name didn't register. It just hung in the air between us, a meaningless sound. Cheryl? My brain scrambled to place the name. I didn't know any Cheryl at his work. He didn't have any friends named Cheryl. And then it hit me. It wasn't like a thought, it was like a physical blow to the chest, a punch that knocked all the air out of my lungs and sent me reeling. Cheryl. My sister. My baby sister, Cheryl. The room started to spin. The pattern on the oriental rug seemed to warp and twist. I felt a high-pitched ringing in my ears that drowned out the ticking of the clock, the sound of my own ragged breathing. I gripped the sides of the ottoman to keep from physically falling over. "No," I whispered, the word a dry rasp in my throat. "No. You're lying. You're just saying that to hurt me because of our fight." "I wish I was," he said, his voice thick with what I mistook for remorse, but now I know was just the pathetic sound of self-pity. My mind, against my will, started replaying the last few months in horrifying, vivid detail. A highlight reel of my own stupidity. Cheryl, coming over for dinner, laughing at Gregory's jokes a little too loudly. Gregory, offering to help Cheryl fix the leaky faucet in her apartment, spending a whole Saturday there while I was at a work conference. Me, thinking how wonderful it was, how lucky I was that my fiance and my sister got along so well, that we were going to be one big, happy family. I felt like the world's biggest fool. A blind, trusting, naive fool. The perfect picture of my life didn't just crack. It exploded into a million tiny, sharp pieces. And in the middle of the wreckage, there I was, staring at the two people I trusted most in the world, finally realizing they had been the ones holding the hammer. I don't know how long I sat there, just staring at him, my mind a screaming void. It could have been minutes, it could have been an hour. My heart had shattered, and the only thing I could feel was a cold, empty numbness spreading through my veins. The man I was going to marry, the man I was going to build a life and a family with, had betrayed me in the most cruel, twisted way possible. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had cheated on me with my own flesh and blood. My sister. The person I was supposed to be able to trust no matter what. Just when I thought it couldn't possibly get any worse, just when I thought I had hit the absolute bottom of the pit of despair, Gregory proved me wrong. He reached across the small space between us, his hand outstretched, as if to offer comfort. I flinched back so violently it was like his hand was a hot poker. "Don't touch me," I managed to choke out. His hand dropped. "Judith, please," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "There's more." More? How could there possibly be more? He had already detonated a nuclear bomb in the middle of our living room. The fallout was settling around us, choking the very air we breathed. What else could there possibly be left to destroy? He couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at a spot on the wall just over my shoulder. "Judith. Cheryl is pregnant." The numbness that had enveloped me instantly vanished, vaporized by a white-hot rage that I had never known I was capable of feeling. It was a primal, blinding fury. I stood up so fast the ottoman I'd been sitting on tipped over and crashed against the leg of the coffee table with a loud crack. "Get out," I said, my voice low and shaking with the force of my anger. "Get your things, and get out of my house. Now. Please, just listen to me," he begged, standing up as well, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "We can fix this. I have a plan." "A plan?" He had the unmitigated audacity to stand there, in the wreckage of the life he had just destroyed, after telling me he had gotten my own sister pregnant, and talk about a plan? "The only plan I want to hear from you," I seethed, jabbing a finger in his direction, "is how you're going to get every last one of your possessions out of here in the next 10 minutes before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing." "You're not thinking clearly, Judith," he said, and his tone shifted in an instant. The pleading desperation was gone, replaced by a chilling, corporate sort of calm. It was the voice he used at work when he was closing a difficult deal. It was manipulative. It was cold. "You're being emotional. You need to take a step back and think about the bigger picture. You need to think about your parents." My parents. They adored Gregory. They treated him like the son they'd never had. And Cheryl, she was their baby. Their golden child. The news of this, of their two children betraying each other in such a sordid way, would absolutely destroy them. My mother had a weak heart, diagnosed a few years ago. My father, a proud, old-fashioned man, would be broken by the shame of it. Gregory knew that. And he was using it as a weapon. "This is our solution," he said, laying out his disgusting, twisted logic as if it were a perfectly reasonable business proposal. "No one else has to know. The baby is about 8 weeks along. We move up the wedding. We get married quietly, next month. Everyone will just think we were eager to start our lives together. When the baby comes, everyone will think it's ours. A little premature, maybe, but no one will question it." I stared at him, my mouth hanging open in speechless disbelief. "You want me to raise the child you had, with my sister?" The words felt like shards of glass in my mouth. "You want me to live a lie for the rest of my life, pretending it's my baby?" "It's the only way to keep this family from falling apart," he insisted, his voice now laced with a sickening earnestness, as if he were the noble hero in this story. "Think of the scandal, Judith. It would ruin Cheryl's reputation. It would absolutely kill your parents. This way, we protect everyone. The baby grows up in a stable, two-parent home. With its aunt as its mother. We raise it together. It's the mature, noble thing to do." And then came the final, brutal twist of the knife. The ultimatum. He was no longer asking. He was telling. He took a step closer, his eyes hard and unflinching. "You have 2 choices, Judith. 1, you go along with this. You find it in your heart to forgive me for a moment of weakness, we get married, and we raise this baby as our own. We keep our family intact. We protect your parents. Or 2, he paused, letting the threat hang in the air like poison gas. You refuse. And I will have no choice but to do the right thing by Cheryl and my child. I'll leave you, and I'll marry her. Our wedding will be off, the ugly truth will come out, and you, Judith, will be the one who tears this family apart. You will be the one who breaks your parents' hearts. All because you couldn't be the bigger person and forgive one mistake. He laid it all at my feet. The blame. The shame. The responsibility. He had created this entire nightmare, but he was making it my job to clean it up. He had trapped me. He had cornered me. And in his cold, confident eyes, I could see it. He was absolutely sure he had won. That night, I didn't sleep a single second. How could I? I told Gregory the first needed space to think, and he, looking immensely relieved and confident, readily agreed to sleep in the guest room. Take all the time you need, he'd said, as if bestowing a great kindness upon me. I was left alone in our bedroom, the room we had painted that soft, hopeful grayish color together. Now, the walls felt like they were closing in on me, the space a prison cell of my own making. Every time I closed my eyes, I was bombarded with images. Their faces. Gregory and Cheryl. Laughing together at our last family dinner. Hugging goodbye a little too long at the door. I replayed every interaction, every shared glance, every inside joke I hadn't been a part of. It was all there, a movie of my own humiliation, playing on a loop right in front of my face. And I had been too blind, too trusting, too blissfully happy to see it. I paced the floor for hours, the old floorboards creaking a mournful rhythm under my bare feet. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I went downstairs at what must have been 3 a.m., my body moving on autopilot, and opened the fridge. I just stood there, the cold air washing over me, staring at the orange juice and the leftover chicken, my mind a complete, static-filled blank. I tried to pour a glass of water from the filter pitcher, but my hand was shaking so violently that the glass slipped, spilling water all over the counter and the floor. I just left it there, a puddle in the dark. I wandered into the small room we used as a home office. On the bookshelf, there was a framed photo of me and Cheryl from when we were kids. We were maybe 7 and 10, gap-toothed and sun-kissed, arms slung around each other, grinning at the camera during a family vacation. We were inseparable back then. I was her big sister. I was the one who taught her how to ride a bike, who helped her with her homework, who was supposed to protect her. And she had taken a knife and plunged it straight into my back. Grief is a strange, unpredictable ocean. It comes in waves. For hours, all I felt was a deep, crushing sorrow that pulled me under. My life, as I knew it, was over. The man I loved was a monster. The sister I adored was a stranger. I slid down the wall to the floor, my back against the bookshelf, and I cried. I cried for the woman I was yesterday, for the future I had lost, until I was hollowed out and had no tears left. But somewhere around 5 a.m., as the first gray, unforgiving light of dawn started to seep through the blinds, something inside me shifted. The sorrow didn't disappear, but it cooled. It crystallized. It hardened into something else. It turned into a cold, quiet, calculating rage. They thought they had me trapped. They thought they could destroy my life and then hand me the broom to sweep up the pieces. They thought I would quietly accept my fate, my life sentence, to protect the family. They thought I would sacrifice my own happiness, my own dignity, my very soul, to cover up their filthy, selfish little secret. They had underestimated me. I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of the computer monitor. My eyes were red and swollen, my face was pale and tear-stained. I looked broken. But for the first time in nearly 12 hours, I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt clear. A chilling, terrifying clarity washed over me. I walked back into the living room just as Gregory was emerging from the guest room, looking well-rested. He looked at me, his face a perfect mask of gentle concern. "Did you get any sleep?" he asked. "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "But I've made a decision." I saw the flicker of triumph in his eyes, the slight relaxing of his shoulders. He thought he had won. You're right, I said, the words tasting like poison and ash in my mouth. We have to protect the family. It's the most important thing. I'm going to need some time to process this. But I'll do it. For my parents. I'll marry you. The relief that washed over his face was so absolute, so complete, it was almost comical. He stepped forward to pull me into a hug of victory, but I put up a hand to stop him. Not yet, I said, my voice cold. I need time, Greg. You have to give me time. Don't touch me. He nodded eagerly, like a dog being promised a treat, completely missing the ice in my voice. Of course, Judith. Whatever you need. I knew you'd do the right thing. He walked away to get ready for work, whistling softly under his breath. He thought it was over. He thought he had successfully managed the crisis. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my very bones, that it was just the beginning. I wasn't just going to leave him. I wasn't just going to expose him. I was going to give them the public shame they were so desperate to avoid. I was going to build them a beautiful stage, invite everyone they knew, and then I was going to burn their whole world to the ground. Chuk Chan Roy. Twa cttuc kachiin qua Judith, bat da tu fan 6, dam bao tuan Thursday niam gak kaku kavi du dai, fong kach ba chiu sao kim suk. The first person I called was my cousin, Diane. Diane and I were more like sisters than cousins, we'd grown up together, 2 houses down from each other. But where I was a romantic, Diane was a pragmatist. She was a paralegal at a big lawyer's office downtown, and her mind worked like a steel trap. She was the one person I knew I could trust completely, the one person who would see this not just as a heartbreaking betrayal, but as a strategic battle that needed to be won. We met for lunch the next day. I chose a small, out-of-the-way diner with cracked vinyl booths and watery coffee, a place where we were unlikely to run into anyone we knew. I couldn't eat. I just pushed the sad-looking tuna melt around my plate while the words spilled out of me in a hushed, frantic rush. The cheating. The baby. The ultimatum. She just listened, her expression growing colder and harder with every sickening detail I shared. When I was finished, my voice hoarse from talking, she didn't offer the empty sympathies I'd been half expecting. She didn't say, "I'm so sorry, this is awful." She took a long sip of her iced tea, her eyes narrowed, and she looked at me with the intensity of a general planning a campaign. "Okay," she said, her voice low and firm. "So this is what we're going to do." Her practical, no-nonsense approach was like a splash of cold water to my face. It cut through the swirling fog of my grief and gave me something solid to hold onto, a purpose. "First," she said, leaning forward across the sticky table. "Let's be clear. We're not just dealing with a cheating fiancé, Judith. This is a calculated, premeditated hostile takeover of your life. He's using emotional blackmail and coercion to trap you into a fraudulent marriage. We need to handle this like a legal case. And for any case, we need evidence. Hard, undeniable evidence." I nodded, feeling the first spark of fight ignite within me. "So, rule number 1, she said, holding up a finger. You do not move out. You do not change your routine. From this moment on, you are an actress, and you are playing the part of a lifetime, the wounded, heartbroken, but ultimately forgiving fiancé. Be sad, be distant, but be compliant. Let him and your sister get comfortable. Let them think they have you right where they want you. Second," she continued, her voice dropping even lower. "You need to become a detective in your own home. You need proof that this wasn't a mistake, but a plan. Text messages, emails, anything. He's arrogant, and arrogant people get sloppy." The thought of snooping, of violating that basic privacy, made my skin crawl. It felt like stooping to their level. I must have had a look on my face, because Diane reached out and put her hand on mine. "Hey," she said softly. "They set the rules of this game, not you. They burned the rulebook the second he slept with your sister. This isn't about being fair anymore. This is about your survival. That night, my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I put our plan into action. I waited until I heard the sound of the shower running. Gregory always left his phone on the charger in the kitchen while he showered. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the phone as I picked it up. His passcode, of course. 0-8-1-4, our anniversary. The irony was so bitter it almost made me gag. My fingers trembled as I opened his messages and scrolled down to Cheryl's name. And there it was. A whole history of their deception, laid out in glowing, sickening black and white. It went back months. Cheryl, is she okay? She hasn't called me all day. I'm starting to worry. Gregory, she's in shock. It's a lot to take in. But she's coming around. She agreed to the plan this morning. Cheryl, are you sure? What if she changes her mind? I feel so guilty, Greg. I look at myself in the mirror and I hate what I see. Gregory, don't do that. This is for the best, for everyone. She's strong, she'll get over it. The important thing is that the baby will have a stable home and our families won't be torn apart. Our plan is working perfectly. We just have to hold our nerve. Our plan. Not his plan. Our plan. They had cooked this up together. My sister wasn't some innocent, remorseful girl who made a terrible mistake. She was his co-conspirator. She was an active participant in the destruction of my life. I quickly and quietly took pictures of the entire conversation with my own phone. My hands were trembling so much the first few pictures were blurry. I had to stop, close my eyes, and take several deep, ragged breaths to steady myself. I felt dirty, like a thief in my own home. But then I remembered Diane's words, they set the rules. I immediately sent the photos to a secure, anonymous email address Diane had set up for me. As I was permanently deleting the pictures from my own phone's trash folder, I heard the water in the shower turn off. My heart leaped into my throat. I quickly wiped my fingerprints off his screen, put his phone back on the charger exactly as I'd found it, and sat down at the kitchen table, grabbing a magazine and pretending to flip through it. When he walked in a minute later, wrapped in a towel, drying his hair, he smiled at me. It was a soft, patronizing smile. Feeling a little better tonight? He asked. A little, I lied, my voice sounding surprisingly steady over the frantic hammering of my own heart. Just trying to take it one day at a time. He thought he was winning. He had absolutely no idea I was building an arsenal. And I had just acquired my first weapon. A week later, I decided it was time to set the stage for the final act. I had been playing my part beautifully, if I did say so myself. I was the very picture of a wounded woman grappling with a terrible reality. I was quiet, somber, but cooperative. I let Gregory think I was slowly, painfully coming to terms with our new, twisted reality. I even endured one stilted, 10-minute phone call with Cheryl, where she cried and repeatedly apologized, and I just mumbled, "I need time, Cheryl," over and over until she finally let me hang up. They were both getting comfortable. Complacent. And that's exactly where I wanted them. It was time to introduce the centerpiece of my plan. I brought it up on a Sunday morning. It was a beautiful, sunny day, and I was making pancakes, his favorite. The whole scene was a carefully crafted illusion of domestic normalcy. The smell of bacon, the sound of sizzling batter, the Sunday paper spread out on the table. All part of the performance. "I've been thinking," I said, carefully pushing a piece of pancake around my plate with my fork, my eyes downcast. "I was talking to Diane the other day, and she said something that, well, it made a lot of sense." He looked up from the sports section, his interest piqued. "Oh yeah? What's that?" "She said that if we're going to do this, if we're really going to commit to this family, we have to do it right. We can't just sneak off to a courthouse. That will just make people talk. They'll suspect something is wrong. We need to show everyone a united front. We need to show them that we're strong, that we're still in love, and that this baby is a blessing, not a secret to be ashamed of. He put down his paper, his eyes narrowing slightly. He was listening intently now, smelling an opportunity. I think, I said, taking a shaky, calculated breath and finally looking him right in the eye. I think we should throw an engagement party. A big one. For all our family and friends. For a second, a flicker of suspicion crossed his face. I could almost see the wheels turning in his head, searching for the catch. A party? He asked slowly. Yes, I said, and I let a little bit of my old enthusiastic, planning-obsessed self seep back into my voice. We'll make it a huge celebration. We can announce our new, earlier wedding date. And we can announce the pregnancy at the same time. We can frame it perfectly. We'll tell everyone that we just found out, that it was a wonderful, happy surprise, and that's why we're moving the wedding up. We control the narrative completely. No whispers, no gossip. Just one big, happy, public announcement. We'll show them all how happy we are. I watched his face as he processed it. I saw the moment the last of his suspicion melted away, replaced by a smug, deeply satisfied smile. He loved it. Of course he did. From his twisted perspective, it was a brilliant move. It would cement our lie in the most public way possible, making it virtually impossible for me to ever back out. It would paint him as the loving, devoted fiancé, and me as the happy, glowing, expectant mother. It was his ultimate victory. Judith, he said, his voice thick with admiration as he reached across the table to take my hand. His skin felt cold. That's actually a brilliant idea. I knew you were strong. I knew you'd see the logic in this. This is the best way forward for everyone. Later that day, steeling myself, I called Cheryl to share the good news. We're going to have an engagement party, Cher, I said, forcing a cheerful, forgiving tone into my voice. A real celebration. And we're going to announce the baby. We're going to do this right, as a family. Oh, Judy, she sobbed into the phone, the sound a mixture of relief and crocodile tears. Thank you. Oh, God, thank you for being so forgiving. You have no idea what this means to me. To us. You're saving my life. I'm not saving you, I thought, a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach as I listened to her performative gratitude. I'm preparing the stage for your public execution. They thought the party was for them. A celebration of their successful manipulation. They had no idea it was all for me. It was my theater. And I was the director, the writer, and the star of the show. And I was going to make sure the final act was one they would never, ever forget. The universe has a funny, and sometimes brutal, way of delivering justice. Sometimes, it comes through careful, meticulous planning. And other times, it just falls right into your lap, gift-wrapped in human stupidity and arrogance. For me, the final, undeniable piece of my puzzle came in the form of a voicemail. It was a Friday night, about 2 weeks before the party. Gregory had gone out for drinks with some friends from work to celebrate some minor victory at his firm. I was at home, sitting on the couch, pretending to watch a movie but actually finalizing the seating chart for the party. A seating chart that was, in itself, a work of art, designed for maximum emotional damage. I had placed my parents at a table with a direct line of sight to both Gregory and Cheryl. My phone buzzed around 11 p.m. I saw Gregory's name pop up and my stomach clenched. I let it go to voicemail. I was in no mood to listen to his cheerful, drunken babble. I was busy, after all, planning his downfall. A minute later, my phone buzzed again with a notification, new voicemail. My first instinct was to delete it without listening. But something, a little voice of pure curiosity, made me press play. I put the phone to my ear, expecting to hear a slurred "Hi honey" on my way home. But that's not what I heard. and what I did hear made the hair on my arms stand up on end. It was Gregory, and he was clearly drunk. The background was loud with the cacophony of a crowded bar. But he wasn't talking to me. I think he meant to call his best friend, Mark, and must have misdialed in his drunken stupor. But he didn't realize his mistake. He left the entire, damning message on my phone. His voice was slurred, but the words were crystal clear, each one a drop of poison. "Mark, hey man, it's me," he began, his voice overly loud and boastful. "Listen, you are not gonna believe how well this whole thing is working out. Judith, she bought the whole thing. Hook, line, and sinker. I just had to turn on the waterworks a little bit, tell her it was a one-time mistake, and bam. She's playing the perfect little soldier." He let out a short, barking laugh that made my blood run cold. And get this, it was her idea to throw a massive engagement party to announce everything. Can you believe the balls on this guy? She's literally planning a party to celebrate me knocking up her own sister. It's perfect. We'll look like the perfect, happy couple. The baby gets a name and a future college fund without me having to deal with a messy, expensive divorce from Judith first, and I still get everything I want. The house, the reputation, all of it. I sat there, frozen on my couch, the phone pressed hard against my ear. My breathing had stopped. Cheryl was getting all weepy and worried, you know, he continued, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial slur. But I told her, you just gotta know how to handle Judith. A little bit of guilt, a little bit of pressure about dear old mom and dad, she folds every time. She doesn't have a choice, man. She's trapped. No woman wants the public shame of a cancelled wedding, you know? She'll play along. She has to. He chuckled again, a low, ugly, self-satisfied sound. Yeah man, she's a real trooper. A real team player. Anyway, gotta go, another round's on me. Talk to you tomorrow. Click. The message ended. I just sat there in the deafening silence of my living room, the echo of his arrogant, drunken words bouncing around in my head. She's trapped. She has no choice. She'll play along. My hands weren't shaking this time. They were perfectly, unnervingly still. I played the message again, just to be sure. Then a third time. And this time, I held my phone up to Diane's laptop and recorded it using the simple audio software she'd installed for me. I saved the file. I emailed it to myself with the subject line "contracts." I backed it up to a thumb drive, which I then buried at the bottom of my jewelry box and labeled "party music." This was it. This wasn't just a text message that could be explained away as a misunderstanding. This was his voice. His words. His confession. His unvarnished, disgusting arrogance. It was the smoking gun. It was the nail in his coffin. And I was going to play it for everyone he had ever known. The 2 weeks leading up to the party were the most surreal of my life. I was living a complete double life. On the outside, I was the busy, slightly stressed-out bride-to-be, a whirlwind of activity. I spent hours on the phone with vendors, my voice a symphony of cheerful efficiency as I discussed canapes and linen colors. I finalized the seating chart, picked up the place cards, and confirmed the DJ. But on the inside, I was a general in the final hours before a major battle. Every decision, every detail, was a strategic move in my campaign. The venue was a beautiful, rustic hall with high ceilings and massive windows that overlooked a manicured garden. I chose it specifically because it had an excellent, state-of-the-art sound system. I met with the AV technician myself a few days before the event, under the guise of checking the microphone for the toasts. I have a special audio surprise I've put together for Gregory, I told him with a conspiratorial wink. A little trip down memory lane. Can you just show me how to connect my phone to the system? I want it to be a surprise. He was a sweet kid, and he just smiled and showed me exactly which cable to use. It's easy, he'd said. Just plug it in and press play. Perfect. The guest list was my masterpiece of psychological warfare. I made sure everyone was there. Our parents, of course. All our aunts, uncles, and cousins. Gregory's boss, a man named Mr. Abernathy, who was considering Gregory for a huge promotion to a senior partner position. My father's business partners, men he'd known for 30 years. Our entire circle of friends, from college buddies to neighborhood couples. I wanted a full house. I wanted a jury of their peers. I chose my dress with military precision. I had initially planned to wear a lovely, conservative navy blue dress. But a week before the party, I was walking past a boutique and saw it in the window. It was a sheath dress in a deep, unapologetic, blood-red color. It was the color of power. The color of anger. The color of revenge. When I tried it on in the store, I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a heartbroken woman. I saw a queen about to checkmate a king. I bought it on the spot. The hardest part, by far, was interacting with my family. My mom would call every day, bubbling with excitement. "Oh, it's going to be so wonderful, Judith," she'd say. "To have the whole family together to celebrate you and Gregory, and the little one on the way. It's such a blessing." Each word was a tiny stab in my heart, a reminder of the pain this would cause her. But I just took a deep breath, swallowed the guilt, and agreed. "I know, Mom. It's going to be a very memorable night." The day before the party, Cheryl came over. She insisted on helping. She brought a Tupperware container with a homemade casserole and a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling wine. She sat at my kitchen counter while I arranged flowers, her belly just starting to show a tiny, almost imperceptible swell beneath her maternity sweater. She looked at me, her eyes brimming with what I knew now were completely fake tears. "I still can't believe you're doing this, Judy," she said, placing her hand on my arm. Her touch felt like a spider crawling on my skin. "After what I did, after what we did, you're a better person than I am. You're a saint. You saved me. You saved this family." I looked down at her hand on my arm. For a fleeting second, the rage inside me was so intense I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her what a pathetic, treacherous snake she was. But I didn't. That would have to wait. I just reached over and patted her hand gently. "We're sisters, Cher," I said, my voice as smooth as polished glass. "We have to look out for each other. That's what families do." She beamed, a look of pure, unadulterated relief on her face. She was completely oblivious. She thought my smile was a sign of forgiveness. She had no idea it was the smile of a predator who was about to watch her prey walk right into the trap she had helped set for me. That night, as I lay in bed, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I was eerily calm. I had all my evidence. The pictures of the texts. And the crown jewel, the voicemail. The party was ready. The guests were invited. The stage was set. All I had to do was deliver the performance of a lifetime. The night of the party was a perfect early autumn evening. The air was crisp and cool, and the leaves on the big maple trees outside the venue were blazing in shades of orange and gold. The hall was decorated beautifully, with fairy lights strung from the high wooden beams and tables adorned with arrangements of white roses and eucalyptus. It looked exactly like the happy, celebratory engagement party it was supposed to be. The illusion was perfect. I stood near the entrance with Gregory, a perfect tableau of the happy couple. He was in his element, beaming, shaking hands, accepting hearty slaps on the back. He had his arm wrapped tightly around my waist, a possessive, proud gesture that made my skin crawl. For anyone looking, we were the picture of love and excitement. He was the charming, successful fiancé, and I, in my striking red dress, was the glowing, expectant mother-to-be. The lie was so thick I felt like I could choke on it, but I just kept smiling. Cheryl arrived with our parents. She was wearing a soft, powder blue dress, a color clearly chosen to broadcast innocence and hint at her condition without being obvious. She rushed over and enveloped me in a hug that felt like being wrapped in lies. "You look absolutely beautiful, Judy," she whispered in my ear. "Everything is perfect." "I'm glad you think so," I said, my smile never wavering as I gently extricated myself from her embrace. My father came over and wrapped me in a big bear hug. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He'd been worried about me, I knew. He thought my quietness over the past few weeks was just pre-wedding jitters. "Gregory is a lucky man. A very lucky man." "Thanks, Dad," I whispered, hugging him back tightly, burying my face in his shoulder for a moment. He was a good man. My father deserved so much better than this. They all did. And tonight, for better or for worse, I was going to give them the truth. The party was soon in full swing. A jazz trio was playing softly in the corner, champagne was flowing, sparkling cider for me and Cheryl, of course, and the room was buzzing with happy, oblivious conversation. I moved through the crowd, a ghost at my own celebration, laughing, accepting compliments on my red dress, all the while feeling like I was watching a movie of my own life. I saw Gregory holding court with his boss, Mr. Abernathy, laughing and gesturing expansively. I saw Cheryl sitting with my mother and his mother, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, accepting their fawning attention. They were so comfortable in their lies. So confident in their victory. After about an hour of this agonizing performance, my cousin Diane found me by the bar. She handed me a glass of sparkling water and gave me a quick, tight hug. "Are you ready for this?" she whispered in my ear, her voice the only truly sane thing in the room. I took a deep breath, the cold bubbles fizzing in my throat. "I'm ready. The AV guy knows you're going up to make a toast. The microphone is live, and the cable for your phone is right there on the lectern, just like we planned," she said, "all business. Just plug it in and press play. I'll be standing by the back door. The second you're done, you walk straight to me. Don't talk to anyone. Got it?" I nodded, my heart finally starting to beat a little faster now. The calm was beginning to give way to a thrumming, nervous energy. It was almost time. Just then, the catering manager stepped up to the microphone to get everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The happy couple, Judith and Gregory, would like to say a few words." A warm round of applause went through the room. Gregory beamed and grabbed my hand, his palms sweaty. He led me up to the small stage at the front of the hall. He stood beside the lectern, his arm once again wrapping possessively around my waist, pulling me close. He thought we were about to deliver our happy news together. He had no idea I was about to deliver his judgment. I looked out at the sea of expectant, smiling faces. My parents. His parents. My sister. All of them, looking up at me, waiting. The show was about to begin. Gregory leaned toward the microphone first, a broad, confident smile plastered on his face. "Wow," he said, his voice booming through the speakers with practiced charm. "Just, wow. Judith and I are we're overwhelmed. To have all the people we love in one room to celebrate with us, our friends, our family, it means the world." He paused and looked down at me, his eyes full of what anyone else would call adoration. I knew it was the look of a satisfied owner. I am the luckiest man alive. The crowd let out a collective, sentimental ah. I just smiled, a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. He squeezed my waist, a little cue for me to look happy. "Now," he said, his voice full of feigned emotion. "My beautiful, strong, incredible fiancé has something she'd like to share with you all." He stepped back, gesturing to me with a flourish, giving me the stage. This was it. The point of no return. I took a deep breath, the scent of roses and perfume filling my lungs, and I stepped up to the lectern. My hands felt cold as I rested them on the polished wood, but my voice, when it came out, was perfectly steady. Thank you, Gregory, I began, my eyes scanning the room, making eye contact with my smiling mother, with Gregory's proud father, with my friends. And thank you all for coming tonight. It truly does mean so much to have you here to share in our joy and celebrate our future with us. I paused, letting the happy, warm feeling settle over the room like a blanket. I needed them comfortable. I needed them unsuspecting. Gregory and I have been on quite a journey together over the past 3 years, I continued, my voice taking on a more serious, emotional tone. And as most of you know, we're about to start the biggest, most exciting chapter of our lives. But what you don't know is that tonight isn't just an engagement party. We have some other, very special news. We're going to be starting a family. A collective gasp of pure joy went through the room. My mother's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes instantly filling with happy tears. People started clapping and cheering. Gregory stepped forward and kissed my temple, a perfectly timed gesture for the audience. I held up a hand, a small, beatific smile playing on my lips. Thank you, thank you. We are so thrilled. And it's true, there is a baby on the way. I let my eyes drift over to my sister, Cheryl. She was beaming, a single, perfect tear of what looked like pure joy rolling down her cheek. Then I looked at Gregory, who was puffing out his chest with pride, looking for all the world like the proud papa-to-be. Then, my tone shifted. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cool, sharp clarity that cut through the celebratory atmosphere like a shard of glass. The father, I said, my voice ringing through the now silent room, is indeed my fiancé, Gregory. I paused for a beat, letting the words hang in the air. Then I turned my head and looked directly, pointedly, at my sister. But the mother is my sister, Cheryl. You could have heard a pin drop. The silence was absolute, deafening, and complete. Every smile in the room froze, cracked, and then shattered. My mother's face went from radiant joy to utter, uncomprehending confusion. My father, who had been standing near the back, took a step forward, his face turning pale with shock. Cheryl's beatific smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure, horrified panic. Gregory's face went white as a sheet. He started to step forward, his hand reaching for the mic, his mouth opening to speak, but I held up a single, steady hand to stop him. I know this must be very confusing for all of you, I said, my voice now dripping with ice. You might think I'm lying, or that I'm having some kind of hysterical breakdown. You might think this is all just some terrible, terrible misunderstanding. But I've learned recently that it's always best to have proof. So, instead of me trying to explain the situation, why don't we let Gregory do it? In his own words. And with that, I took out my phone. My movements were calm and deliberate. I plugged the waiting cable into the headphone jack. My fingers were steady as I navigated to the audio file I had labeled party music. I turned the volume all the way up. And I pressed play. And Gregory's drunken, arrogant, slurring voice filled the hall. You are not gonna believe how well this whole thing is working out. Judith, she bought the whole thing. Hook, line, and sinker. She's literally planning a party to celebrate me knocking up her sister. She's trapped. She has no choice. Every word echoed off the high wooden beams. Every ugly, triumphant, slurred syllable. The room was frozen in a state of collective shock and horror. Gregory's parents were staring at their son, their faces masks of utter disbelief and abject shame. My father was now looking from Gregory to Cheryl, his face turning a dark, dangerous shade of red I had never seen before. The voicemail ended. The silence that followed was even more profound and terrible than before. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, thick with betrayal and disgust. I looked up from my phone. My eyes met Gregory's across the lectern. The arrogance was gone. The confidence was gone. All that was left was the panicked, cornered look of an animal caught in a trap. He opened his mouth, but only a dry, croaking sound came out. He looked like he was suffocating. Then I looked at Cheryl. She was openly sobbing now, ugly, gasping sobs, her hands covering her face as if she could hide from the 100 pairs of eyes that were now boring into her. My mother, looking pale and unsteady, was being helped into a chair by my aunt. Just as Gregory took another stumbling step towards me, probably to try and offer some pathetic explanation, my father moved. He didn't run. He just moved with a quiet, deadly speed and stood directly between me and Gregory. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, a solid, immovable wall, his eyes fixed on Gregory with a look of pure contempt. I leaned back into the microphone one last time. My voice was no longer angry. It was just calm. Final. So, as you can see, I said to the silent, staring crowd, there will be no wedding. My engagement to Gregory is hereby, and very publicly, over. I turned to the horrified couple. I will not marry a man to cover up his scandal. But I won't stand in the way of him doing the right thing, as he so eloquently put it in his ultimatum to me. I looked directly at my weeping sister. And I will not raise another woman's child. Especially not hers. I took a moment and looked around the room, at all the shattered faces of the people I loved, and the people who thought they knew me. I'm sorry you all had to be here for this, I said, my voice softening just a fraction. But lies like this, they fester in the dark. They only die when you drag them into the light. My only regret in all of this is the pain this truth will cause my parents, who deserved none of it. I then placed the microphone carefully back on its stand. The soft thud it made seemed to echo through the entire hall. I turned away from the stage, away from the wreckage of my former life. I didn't look at Gregory's crumbling face or Cheryl's heaving shoulders. I started to walk. I walked past the stunned guests, who parted from me as if I were royalty. I walked past my weeping mother, past my furious father. I walked towards the back door, where Diane was waiting. I didn't run. I walked with my head held high. And I didn't look back once. If you are still listening to me, right here in this moment, would you please help me by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 down below? It helps me know that you gave me a like, and it tells me that you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you could ever know. Please, just comment with the number 1, and then, listen to me tell you the rest of my story. Diane had her car running when I got outside. The cool night air felt like a blessing on my hot skin. I slid into the passenger seat without a word, and she just drove. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just drove through the quiet suburban streets, and I just stared out the window at the blurry lights of houses where normal people were living normal lives, the adrenaline slowly draining out of me, leaving me feeling hollowed out and strangely, profoundly peaceful. The fallout, as you can imagine, was immediate and catastrophic. Diane, bless her heart, acted as my information hub and my gatekeeper for the next few weeks, filtering the chaos so I didn't have to face it head-on. The party ended, she told me later, in a blaze of shouting and tears. My father, a quiet, gentle man who I had never seen lose his temper in his entire life, apparently laid into both Cheryl and Gregory with a cold fury that stunned everyone. He told Cheryl not to come home, not to even call, until she had figured out how to be a decent human being. He told Gregory that if he ever saw him near our family again, he'd call the police for harassment. Gregory's parents were mortified beyond words. They were good people, caught in the crossfire of their son's despicable behavior. They dragged him out of the party, and according to Diane's sources, they gave him an ultimatum of their own: he would take full financial responsibility for the baby, and he would do whatever it took to manage the public shame he had brought upon their family name. His potential promotion at work evaporated overnight. Mr. Abernathy was a deeply religious man. His large inheritance he was expecting from a wealthy, conservative grandparent was also suddenly in jeopardy. Under the immense, crushing pressure from both families, Gregory and Cheryl did what they had to do. There was no romantic proposal. There was a grim, transactional agreement. Diane sent me a link to the online announcement a month later. They were engaged. It was a small, joyless photo. They both looked like they were at a funeral. They were married 2 months after that, in a small, sterile ceremony at the courthouse that only their humiliated parents attended. A shotgun wedding in the truest sense of the word. My relationship with my parents was difficult for a while. They weren't angry at me, not really. They were just broken. Shattered by the betrayal of one child and the public detonation caused by the other. My mother cried every time I spoke to her on the phone, her voice weak with a grief I couldn't fix. My father was distant, consumed by his anger and disappointment in Cheryl. It took time. Weeks later, my dad called me. His voice was rough. "I'm sorry, Judy," he'd said. "I'm sorry I didn't see what he was. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I don't know how to fix this with your sister." We talked for a long time. It was the beginning of healing for us. Cheryl tried to reach out a few times. She sent long, rambling emails full of excuses disguised as apologies. I was lost. I was confused. I always felt like I was in your shadow. I think I really loved him. I deleted them all without reading past the first line. The woman I had called my sister was gone. In her place was a stranger I had no desire to know. For my own sanity, for my own survival, I had to sever the tie completely. The question of custody or my role in the child's life was never on the table for me. That child was theirs to raise, a living, breathing monument to their betrayal. For the first month after the party, I just existed. I stayed with Diane, sleeping on her surprisingly comfortable couch. I quit my job via email. I hired a real estate agent and told her to sell my house, our house, as quickly as possible, for whatever price she could get. I felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that was no longer mine. Packing up that house was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Every object held a memory, now tainted. The grayish paint on the walls seemed to mock me. I packed my personal things and told the agent to sell the rest with the house. I didn't want any of it. But slowly, very slowly, like the first tentative light after a long, dark night, the sun started to come out again. The house sold in 3 weeks. The day I signed the final closing papers, I felt a massive, physical weight lift off my shoulders. I took my half of the money, packed my car with the few boxes of belongings I'd kept, said a tearful goodbye to Diane, and I left. I drove for 2 days, with no real destination in mind. I just needed to put miles between me and that town, between me and those memories. I drove south, towards the ocean. I ended up in a small, quiet city by the coast, a place where no one knew my name or my story. A place where I could just be. I found a small apartment with a tiny balcony that overlooked the ocean. Most days, all I could see was fog, but I knew the water was there. That was enough. I got a new job, something completely different from my old corporate life, working at a local library. It was quiet. It was peaceful. The smell of old books and dust was calming. My new life was built on small, simple things. The kindness of a coworker who brought me a coffee. The satisfaction of helping a child find the perfect book. The rhythm of the waves I could hear from my bedroom window at night. Rebuilding a life from scratch is hard, lonely work. There were nights I'd sit on my balcony and just cry, mourning the future I thought I was going to have. There were days when the grief would hit me out of nowhere, a sudden, powerful wave that threatened to pull me under. But for every bad day, there was a good one. A day I'd take a long walk on the beach and feel the sun on my face. A day I'd discover a new coffee shop with the best scones. A day I'd finish a good book and feel content. A few months ago, Diane called to tell me that Cheryl had the baby. A little boy. I felt a brief, distant pang of something, not sadness, not anger. Just a sense of finality. That chapter was well and truly over. Diane says they are miserable together, that Gregory resents the salary he now has to use to support a family he never really wanted, and Cheryl resents that he had to be publicly shamed into marrying her. Their life is the prison they built for themselves, brick by brick. My life is my own again. I've even started dating a little, very cautiously. I'm learning to trust again, starting with trusting my own judgment. I am stronger than I ever thought I could be. They wanted me to live a quiet life of shame to avoid a public scandal. They wanted me to sacrifice my own truth on the altar of their comfort and reputation. But I chose to face the scandal, to light the match and watch the lies burn down to the ground. And in the ashes, I found something I didn't even know I had lost, myself. My strength. My voice. And that, I've learned, is the most valuable inheritance of all. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here with me.